Hey guys, so I'm here again. Um, I'm on my tier list video that I have currently. It's not a super popular video yet, but there was someone in my comment section who had a bit of a discussion with me, and I had already wanted to reestablish some of my thoughts from that tier list because I was on a bit of a time crunch and I didn't explain some killers very well. Uh, but because we had that disagreement, I wanted to go ahead and make. I'm not gonna remake the whole video. I don't expect this to really get seen that much, but for anyone who does see this, I wanted to, I guess, explain better a couple of the killers that I didn't explain very well. For the most part, I think I explained most of them fine. I'm sure you can piece together why most of the killers are put in the place where they are on my original list. But the two main killers, sorry, there are four killers I'm going to be talking about. So let's start with Wesker since he's at the top. So Wesker he's a very versatile kit. And it's a bit like how I explained Skull Merchant in my original video, where he has many small things. So like, let's go over them. He's a super large tear radius, which can benefit certain niche builds. That's niche builds, but that's still a benefit he has. Um, he has a mobility power that it's not super crazy. It doesn't cover a crazy amount of ground, but it lets you close the gap on survivors. Survivors who hold forward, they just hold W, which is a very common thing to do against like half the roster of killers. Well, just Wesker negates this entirely. He also, when Wesker grabs survivors, he injures them, and well, okay, he can injure them, but whether he injures them or not, he infects them. And if they're fully infected in a chase later on, for whatever reason they didn't spray it, that's an insta down with your grab. So that's also, yeah. He's also pretty efficient at, I guess, pushing offense. So what I mean by this, so when you run out of range on your bound, when you grab a survivor, you will throw the survivor. If this survivor is in a corner of the map, not only can Wesker move slightly fast, he doesn't move very fast, but he moves at a decent pace, and it's not a super long cooldown. So especially if you're in a corner of the map and you throw a survivor and you injure them, they're forced to run back into you. In which case, you're pretty much already on their tail by the time you're done recovering, and it's pretty much an insta down. So he has that. Wesker can also grab survivors who are recently unhooked or unhooking, I guess. So if he grabs someone who just unhooked another survivor, he can grab them and push them into the survivor who got unhooked. So not only does he infect, I think both of them, maybe. Uh, I think it infects both if the first person isn't already infected, mind you. But secondly, you injure the first guy and infect them, and then you deep wound the second guy, the person who got unhooked. So that's an injure, and you're putting the other guy in deep wounds. So if you really need to tunnel, well, there you go, guaranteed tunneling, because it's not like they have it's not like they have off the record or whatever, because you guaranteed got rid of it. Because when survivors are deep wounded, they can't use any of their perks that would put them into deep wound. So there's that. Which leads me kind of into my next thing. Wesker is a very good tunneler. Not only, again, like I said, he can force out deep wound by hitting multiple survivors, but because of how strong infection is, so when survivors are fully infected, not only can you stay down them with your power, but you also have 8% hindered. Being hindered by 8% against any killer is not good. And you pretty much guaranteed to get caught, especially by Wesker, unless you're in a super safe loop. So you're going to want to spray yourself. You're going to have to. So at some point or another, you're going to guarantee that you give Wesker info. Because at any point of the map, no matter where you are, when you spray yourself, you give Wesker killer instinct. So he knows exactly where you are, no matter what. So he has all these things that come together to make him have a very versatile kit. Uh, which honestly he'd be even higher, but he's limited by the fact that he doesn't have any super giga add-ons that make him super overpowered. I actually quite like Wesker's add-ons, but they're not bad. They're not badly designed. They're not poorly designed, but they are just bad. They're not amazing. None of his add-ons are super tremendous, kind of like old Blight or even current Blight, honestly. So hopefully I explained that a bit better. Now we have the Skull Merchant, who I'm gonna kind of just go on like a little shopping list like Wesker and explain specifically. So in my last video, I kind of just said that she had a lot of small things that made her better, and I didn't necessarily explain what those were. So bear with me, I'll explain. So first of all, she's like, as of now, survivors can't really face her. Um, they have such like a, because of how she was when she came out, where she was just a gen patrol killer. People have such a negative view of her, which even still now she's super boring, and people just give up. They just give up. They don't want to play against her. They don't want to try to learn how to play against her at all. So that already has that benefit going, where people just don't want to fight her. But more in detail on the tiny things that she has that make her better. She gets stealth while setting drones. She gets info on survivors from the drones. She gets a speed boost when survivors are hit by drones or like tagged. They get the little micro bot or whatever. She gets a speed boost when that happens. She also guarantees an injure from her power, even if like if you place a drone on a loop and the survivor gets tagged and then they'll get injured immediately, or well, they'll get injured. Even if the survivor gets tagged by a drone and then they go to a different loop that has a drone on it, then they'll still get injured. It doesn't matter if it's the same drone or not. So they'll get injured, they'll get slowed, and they get, if they're already injured, they'll get deep wounded. So you with them guaranteeing injure, with them getting deep wounded, which can like I guess make it harder to see on your screen, which in itself is fine depending on the person that you're going up against. With them being slowed, if I didn't already mention that, and then with you getting a speed boost, all of those together just let the Skull Merchant just, I guess, overpower survivors. Eventually she will just be better than the survivor and catch up to them. Survivors can't loop a Skull Merchant. They have to go to different tiles. So, in a general sense, there are ways to counter the Skull Merchant by just delaying her drones and how they work. But with Skull Merchant's simple set of add-ons and simple kit, and her kit that just does several things, she's very average, but she's just fine. She's good. To be honest, if survivors would take the time to try and learn how to face her better, she would probably be lower. But as of now, I don't play. She's probably my least played killer. So I don't play her, but as far as I'm aware, people give up against her. So that probably gives her more kills than she really needs. Okay. Again, hopefully I explained her a little bit better as well. Excuse me. I'm kind of tired. But so now we have Dredge. Let's talk about Dredge and Sadako. These are the two killers that that person in the comment section had a little bit of a disagreement with. So I'll talk about Dredge. I don't even think Dredge was a killer that I did not explain well. Like, I think I explained him fine, but I guess some people just don't understand and they just get shrouded by their own opinion. So, like, man, okay. So first of all, Dredge has his Nightfall. Beyond the obvious benefits that you get, that I won't really mention because they're pretty given, like the faster teleporting or whatever, I hear people talking about it. I see people talking about it so often now, and I don't know why. Like some streamer or someone must have said it, and now other people are saying it to other people. Like, other people are passing off that info. And it's the fact that during Nightfall, if people have super dark monitors. It's not very bright. They just can't see. Like they just cannot see at all during nightfall, which is true. I don't know who started saying that. Like I don't know who got people to start saying that, but it is true. So that there's that. That's already a benefit enough where survivors just can't deal with Dredge's nightfall. Certain survivors, like mostly newer players, but yeah. So, oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm reading off of a script I wrote, but it looks kind of I didn't write it very well. Let's let's talk about the main thing that makes Dredge like bad and why he's in C tier. So he is very inconsistent. Again, I'm sorry for that long pause. I'll do better here. So he's very inconsistent on certain maps. Like RPD for example, there are just important generators that you just cannot defend. You can teleport to lockers that are super far away and walk towards them, but survivors can hear you come. If not for the fact that survivors can just loop a dredge, um, because they have plenty of time to see you coming, they can hear you coming. Dredge is so loud. He has a constant like whooshing noise that is not only directional but it's also audible. Meaning like they can hear how intense it is. Like it gets louder when you're closer and gets less. It gets quieter as you're farther. Uh, so mind games, like regular mind games, don't work against Dredge because or work as Dredge because they can hear you. If you move one way, they'll move the other because they can hear where you're standing. Um, so even if they're not paying attention well, like even if they're not paying full attention, they still don't. It doesn't matter. They can still just hear you so well. It is so loud. It's always there no matter what. Even if you're undetectable, the sound persists. So there's that. His biggest inconsistency and his biggest flaw is how loud he is and his locker placement, like the inconsistencies of his locker placements within maps. But let's talk about his remnant. His remnant it lets you leave like a shadow or like a little. To be honest, it looks like oh man, what's the thing from Hellraiser? Love is did they call it Leviathan? No, they don't call it Leviathan, right? Do they? Because I know Leviathans are just like mythical sea creatures, but I genuinely forgot what they call it. But it's the fucking like the god of the of all the Cenobites. But either way, that's what it kind of reminds me of. So there's that. But it's like a shadow, and you can teleport to it. So you leave it behind, and you can move around, and you could teleport back to it. So you could use it in chase. Compared to chase powers in this game, it's weaker than most, but it's still a chase power. It's still good when you use it right. It lets you get guaranteed hits that you wouldn't otherwise get. But the only issue is it slows you down when you move. So survivors can use exhaustion perks to get away. They can just hold W. They can just all the popular perks against Dredge are super. Or sorry, all the popular perks that survivors use are really good against Dredge. It's kind of like twins. I have twins in B tier right now because she's a good killer. The perks that survivors use are just really good against her. But Dredge, his remnant power, that's it's a pretty consistent power, and it lets you get free hits. But survivors that use good perks are good against him. And it's also kind of slow. So even if you do get a guaranteed hit, it can still take you an extra like 3 seconds before you actually get the hit. Which may not seem like a lot, but it's pretty significant. It's very sluggish. Um, but beyond all that, like I don't know. I'm all this stuff is stuff I discussed in my last video. So I think the person in my video, he disagreed with me, but I don't know why. Like I put Dredge in C tier, and I think while I was there in my list, I explained how he can be like potentially up here around where Singularity is, but that's the thing. I don't think I explained that. So if I didn't, like, let me. I know the dude isn't gonna listen to me. I'm doing this mostly for anyone else who actually wants to listen to what I have to say, but Dredge, he can be so. First of all, he has add-ons. He has some pretty mean add-ons that you can make with builds that lead for some pretty nasty combos. But he can be such a monster, such a beast on certain maps. He could be so oppressive. Like beyond what I was talking about with the Nightfall, where against like bad survivors or survivors with bad screens, that's already good. But again, on a map like Midwich, for example, Midwich, Midwich for is probably his best map. Midwich is a good killer map. I get it, but like holy shit, there's lockers everywhere, and every loop is good for your remnant. So your both of your powers, your good mobility power, and your remnant, your consistent power, they're all good. They're good everywhere on that map, and he has such a he's such a adaptable, I guess, kit to builds. So he's such a versatile killer with builds. He can use so many different builds because of his add-ons and because of the way he works. He can use so many different builds that keep him, I guess, unpredictable. Unlike certain killers who really only have one major playstyle, which survivors can, when they face it a lot, they'll get good at facing it. But Dredge has multiple playstyles, multiple builds that can catch people off guard. So when you take him onto a good map where there are good locker placements and you have a strong build that maybe even if you're lucky you can counter certain survivors, like maybe they're super hellbent on healing a bunch and you bring an anti-heal build because you can do that as Dredge. So all these things, like, he can be so oppressive up here, but at the same time on certain maps, on a lot of maps actually, he's like down here where Myers is. So I guess what the person in the video did not understand is that I averaged them out. Okay, like, listen, he's super strong up here at his best, and he's down here at his worst. I think, on average, he's more so down here. So you understand, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 tiers down, and up is like, well, 10 plus tiers. So I put him lower. I averaged him out lower because he's weaker more often than he is stronger. But like if he were up here more often, if he felt like he were up here more often, I'd put him like here or even like here. But no, he's down here or around here more often than he is strong, which is why I put him in C tier. None of the killers in C tier are good. None of them. Like, they have their strengths, sure, but they're all bad. These killers are just all consistently bad. There's nothing they can do. Clown has strengths. Ghostface is kind of just a better Myers. Legion has his ability to always injure people super fast. Dredge has his strengths, and when those strengths come into play, he is a absolute beast. Like, he's kind of like he's like Hag or maybe Oni, or he's one of those killers where when everything goes right, you feel so in control. Like, you're so powerful compared to certain other killers. It's like you have the feeling of what you have as a nurse, but always. And on the topic of nurse, I do want to talk about her later. I'm not going to talk about her now. Someone in my comment section pointed out that it's a bit of a problem where everyone knows she's the best, everyone talks about how she's the best, but no one really addresses why that's a problem. So I will be making a video in the future about why she's a problem, what I suggest to fix her. But beyond that, yeah, that person who was arguing with me probably isn't listening to a word I'm saying, because I know Dead by Daylight players. They're very stubborn. They're very, how do I say this politely? They're very, I guess just stubborn. Like, they don't, especially because that person probably thinks I'm an idiot. So they don't want to listen to anything I say. So instead of me saying, well, he's here, C tier, being a low tier, they probably just think, oh, well, Dredge isn't that bad. So in his mind, he thought he was way up here. But anyways, now we'll talk about Sadako. So in my original list, I had Sadako here because it's a bit weird for me. All right. So when Sadako first came out, she was here. She was super bad, and then she got overtuned to shit, where she had like map wide condemn, and she was so overtuned. She was like around here, and then on the PTB she was pretty much back to down here. She was basically back to her initial iteration, but like with some slight buffs. But then from PTB to live, I actually missed this. It completely slipped my mind, which if that person that I was arguing with is listening to me and to everyone else who watched my video, I apologize for that. I'm correcting it now. Please forgive me. But that still isn't enough. I still think at most she gets here. And this is only because I'm trying to be nice to that person by giving them the benefit of the doubt. He knew about the patch, I didn't. About the buff, I didn't. He probably knows a little bit more about me, but I don't know. His entire argument was about some dude named One Pump Willie. Like, his entire argument, he didn't even tell me why Sadako was good. He didn't say any reason why Sadako was good. All he did was just say that Sadako can insta-kill a survivor. He didn't mention anything about like how long that takes or whatever. He didn't say anything. All he said was that Sadako can condemn survivors and insta-kill them, and that he just said that if I would watch someone named One Pump Willie, I'd think Sadako were better. Which, that completely turned me off from arguing with him at all, because anyone who takes something that someone else says and uses it as their own argument, it's so and I'm sorry if you like, because I know there are a lot of DVD channels, including what I want to do myself, that are info related channels, and they want to help people, but you can't just take what they tell you and in any discussion you're in say, well, this person said that, so I'm right, you're wrong. That's so dumb. And I don't want to I don't want to get into it with what streamers have fans like that, because I don't want like to sound like I'm attacking the streamers or anything, but there are people like that in this community who will hear someone say something and they'll just use that as their argument. They won't think for themselves. So I'll like I'll discuss why I think I can't go into full. I don't. It's so weird for me to explain why Sadako's not good, other than just saying that she doesn't really have a chase power. So I'll try to explain it as easily as I can. So during the PTB, she could only lock in 2 condemn stacks. Or I don't even think it was during the PTB. I think it was before she got pushed to live where they like decided to nerf her even more. But then they decided to buff her. They were like, okay, we'll still kind of do that, but then we'll give her some buffs in return. So what did they do? Again, they took away her map wide condemned, and then they made it to where there was a cooldown on condemning. So it was kind of an in between of her original version and like her old version. It took the bad from the original version and the bad from the buffed, like the super giga buffed version. And so it was kind of here because she still had some things about her that were better than original Sadako. But then they decided to buff her. They took away the cooldown, which was probably the best thing to come out of that. The cooldown was bad, and it's good that they removed that. That was probably the best thing that came out of her buffs. Good on them. And then they buffed the amount of condemned stacks that get locked in from 2 to 3. And then they gave her more time on her movement speed when she comes out of a TV. And then they also buffed her movement speed while she manifests. So all of those are good. All of those are buffs. You know, none of those are bad. There was no like compensation nerf or anything. Just straight buffs for her. But that doesn't stop the fact that she is nothing she can do against tapes. Survivors have 0 downside for grabbing tapes. And if you get hooked, it's not a huge deal. It's even with the buff from 2 to 3 condemned stacks getting locked in, it's not a huge deal at all if you get hooked. And if you don't get hooked, there is literally no downside to grabbing a tape and inserting it into the TV. Like it's, in general, like to sum it up, she doesn't have super potent map pressure anymore. She can't just always condemn everyone. She can't be everywhere. So the best thing she can do now is just rely on her basic stealth mechanic and her like invisibility mind games, which were made a little bit better from the PTB, which that was probably my favorite part, because that was my favorite part of playing Sadako. but basic stealth and some, as far as I'm aware, it's kind of buggy right now. Like it doesn't work properly right now. So a somewhat buggy invisibility, mind game, as well as whatever, that's not a chase power, so that alone isn't enough. And as far as I'm aware, the person in the video was talking about how Sadako's TVs are more consistent than Dredge's lockers. Yeah, that's literally what I talked about, how inconsistent Dredge is. And he was saying how the speed boost makes Sadako so much better. Sure, that's true, but survivors see Sadako coming out of the TV. The speed boost doesn't mean anything if they have shit around, and they're always going to have stuff around. And if they don't, well, it's either on a map that's in your favor, that probably would have been in Dredge's favor, or you're using super strong perks, which I can't, you can't. Like I said, DBD players are super stubborn. You can't get into their heads. You can't convince them anything otherwise. So in his mind, Sadako's more consistent than Dredge. He's better than Dredge. Anything Dredge can do, Sadako can do better. And that's fine. You can have your opinion. But I just want to explain how Dredge has a chase power, and it is better than what was given credit for in that comment that he made. I'm pretty sure he was only saying it's as bad as it was because he wanted to over-exaggerate just to make Dredge sound worse. So he has a chase power, Sadako doesn't. Sadako has stealth, but even then, there's like it's kind of like a lullaby, kind of not. So you can't even. I've never actually been snuck up on by a Sadako before while playing Survivor. It's from what I can remember. I'm sure it's happened a couple times, but like most of the time, if a Sadako is coming up to me, I hear her and I see. Sometimes I even see her. It's like it's not that hard to miss her. Which with that description alone, it probably sounds like to you guys, it's like, oh well, you probably just face terrible killers. You're probably just a super low MMR player. Think what you want, but I can't. It's just a fact. She doesn't have a chase power, and her stealth alone isn't good enough. And even with teleporting to TVs, there's no counterplay for tapes. There's nothing. There's no downside for survivors grabbing tapes. And again, this all keeps her in check. I'm not saying that she should have these things, but I am saying because she doesn't have these things, that she's bad. So I don't know what to do with Sadako, because she either has to be super bad or super strong. So I don't know what they can do with her. So that's my take. She doesn't have a chase power, and there's no downside for survivors grabbing tapes. Just because some dude named One Pump Willie, which again, I'm sure they're a great person. I did look them up, so yeah, I know it's a guy. I'm sure he's a great guy. I didn't watch any of his gameplay. I just seen that he's a Sadako main. And I don't want to really. It's a bit rude to talk about people who don't know who I am, so apologies. But again, he seems like a great guy, but I can't justify arguing with someone who uses their entire point of discussion that someone said this, someone is good at this, like whatever. That's not an argument. So hopefully I explained her well. I didn't explain her well, but hopefully I explained her simply enough that it's not. I don't know. I'm actually at a loss for words. You guys can hear me stuttering. This is so bad. I don't know. I just. You guys let me know. You guys let me know if you agree with these. I know that one person doesn't, and I know his mind isn't going to be shifted. For all I know, he probably thinks Sadako's up here and Dredge is just flat out down here, and he can't go any higher. But for anyone else who comes by this video and watches this, let me know, please. The comments do help. And I didn't make this video because I was mad at him and that I can't take criticism. I can take criticism. In fact, I'm sure you guys all hate the fact that I'm stuttering over myself and pausing a lot. Just let me know things. Just help me make my videos better. That would help me a lot. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'm gonna end it here. I appreciate anyone who does watch this. And please, again, let me know your feedback. It does help, and I know a lot of people say they can take criticism and they actually can't, but say whatever you want. I can deal with it. So, anyways, if you're watching this and you're at this point, Have a good night or a good day or whatever. I'm out of here. Peace.